Okay, so Mayor Cam Guthrie, thank you for joining us once again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, let me just we're recording this before the final budget vote on Wednesday, but so this will either be fairly prophetic or perhaps a sliding door situation. But I want to start here because no matter what happens with the vote on Wednesday, um, at the budget breakfast with the chamber last week, um, very interesting to hear you talk about like we need to say no to more downloading. But so this is kind of like a philosophical question. Obviously, as mayor, and you are not alone in this, a lot of your colleagues across Ontario have this very similar thought. We can't take any more downloading, but there are times when the provincial government says, here's some money to upgrade Lion Pool, or here's some money to do this much needed work on Wellington Street. So, how do you, as mayor, going forward, say, no, no, no to this, but yes to this. How are you thinking about managing that balance going forward?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So my gut reaction, and I think I'm on the right track in answering it, would be to differentiate between capital and operating. And I think that's probably the key to answering this question. Most of the announcements that come from the provincial government and or federal, but mostly provincial, are capital related. So we are giving you some money to build this thing, or we are giving you some money to help in this area. One-time funding usually, specific to a project, and it's once and done. Sometimes there's sod turning, sometimes a ribbon cutting, and then that's it. But where I think the downloading problem is occurring is not so much on the capital side,
Mm,
although I could argue a little bit on the development charge differences that have occurred over the last few years, but it is on the operating side. And operating is something that is continual; it's in perpetuity. So it's a slow sort of it starts slow is what I'm trying to say, and then it starts to ramp up in certain different areas. Social services might be one, policing might be in another, where there's legislative changes, and all of a sudden we have to meet those on the operating side of the ledger, and that's in perpetuity, and that is always going to be part of the large increases in property tax impacts that occur. We will always say yes to funding from upper levels of government, of course, but if it is going to be mostly on the operating impact side and not the capital side, I think that's where it just starts slow and then it becomes embedded, 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 embedded. And I would just say that, you know, I think I said this at the chamber event that the people that are the happiest when it comes time to put operating costs embedded in municipal budgets is upper levels of government,
mm.
because then they are able to sort of do this, and they're like, well, thank you, we don't really have to take care of that issue. And my fear when I talk to my colleagues across the province on this is that if one does it and then five do it and then 20 do it and then 40 do it and so on, it starts to reduce our ability to have unity around the issue to push back respectfully to the province and to have them say, oh, maybe we do need to step into this space. But it's much easier for them to say, I don't need to, when you have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 big cities start to play in this sandbox that should be theirs.
Right, and it, it's it's not just the difference between capital and operating. It's the difference between like having an easy conversation and having a difficult conversation. And part of that too, though, is we ran into each other on Saturday, so same thing. Like I've run into your council colleagues and just out in the community. I'm not going to run into Doug Ford out in the community. I'm not going to run into the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing out into the community. So maybe they never get it. But in terms of like we this conversation, like we can't do stuff because then that takes the responsibility off of the feds and off of the province. You're still, if you can hold that line and say, we're not going to do this. But then you hear it from the other end, which is the community who are going to run into you at those public events and say, Cam, Kathy, whoever, like you need to fix this. And you can't really just say to them, well, if I fix it, that means the province and the feds won't, and they really need to be the ones to fix it. So it's kind of,
Yeah.
it just feels like a bit of mutually assured destruction here, right?
I look. I think you say that well, but I think the time is upon us to start saying no. We're not going to be in this space now. I don't know if my colleagues are with me on this. Probably some are. I don't know. I imagine most of them are. Um, and I think it is an education moment. And that's not to say that the electorate and the citizens and businesses don't understand. But I think if those opportunities in the grocery store or a park or an event that I run into people and they're asking these similar questions, it's time to actually just say, I'm with you. That's a
Mm,
really important issue. And
mm.
that's under the provincial government and that's under the federal government. So stand with me. Don't stand at me. Stand beside me and let's collectively use our voices together to advocate where the jurisdiction belongs. And I think that in some cases, I don't mind saying this. I'm probably to blame a little bit. You see
Hmm.
shortfalls, especially around social services. You see shortfalls, and the shortfalls are people,
Right.
right? And so
Yeah.
your heartstrings are pulled, and rightly so. And so you're like, you know what? We're going to step into this space, and we're going to give a small amount of money, and then the next year that small amount of money grows to another thing, and then it expands the scope a little bit, and now $200,000 turned into $500,000 and $1 million and $5 million, and it's all because it's noble, good things to do for people. And the whole time though, the taxpayer then is like, at the beginning they might be like, oh, this isn't too bad, but as that grows and grows and grows and grows, and then the provincial or federal government goes, hey, you're taking care of it for us, so we don't really need to do anything. We start to lose. It's almost like a point of no return.
Right.
And I feel like we are now at that tipping point, if I could use that analogy, where not just Guelph but other municipalities need to say, yeah, no, no, we're not doing this anymore.
But not, to maybe take some of the blame off of you, though, I think one of the things, like something like welcoming streets or embedding like impact workers with Guelph Police, that yeah, you're taking some responsibility off of the provincial government's hands. But on the other hand, you're trying to lead by example, say, look how easy this is. Like $250,000 a year. I mean, it's a huge sum of money regardless, but
I
a
understand.
bit
Yep, yep,
bigger than a
yep.
bit big for the Guelph budget. That's a pretty sizable chunk of change in the Guelph
Sure.
budget, not so much in the Ontario budget. And I think one of the goals there is communities like Guelph are trying to demonstrate, here's what we can cook up in the community. Imagine what we could do if we had the financial resources of a province or of a federal government to support this.
So I'm very glad you said that, because I was going to say, I wanted to say this anyways. Good conversation is that sometimes in this space, we do step into these waters to prove a point. And
Hmm.
what I mean by that is, okay, we're going to pay for another impact worker who's going to be a partner for a police officer in the downtown core, as an example. Well, now the police will be taking accountability for that, tracking, getting the data and the feedback to compile over maybe a 1 year process. And then I can use that information, because it will all be positive, because we know it will be,
Right.
to then go to the province and say, hey, we really need $2.5 million from you to fill this gap. We did $250,000 of that to prove to you that these are the results.
Hmm.
Can you please help us with the other 80% that we need from you? So, yes, sometimes you can step into these spaces to try and prove a point.
Hmm. I want to look at things another way, and this is a two-pronged kind of question, which is, um, I'm not sure if it's purposeful, so this is why I'm asking. But the separation of the city of Guelph budget from the shared services and the local board's budget. What I've been sort of feeling from the things you've been saying is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like we have stuff we can control at the city, and then we have I think you use this metaphor, sliding the bill across the
The
table.
invoice across the table. Yeah.
Right. And I wonder if that's purposeful in a way that sort of is like trying to say, you're the mayor, but as mayor, your fiscal powers, despite strong mayor powers, are not limited. And if you're trying to sort of spread the blame, or the responsibility, let's say.
I don't think it's about spreading the blame. I think I would say it's about education.
Hmm.
Like cannot tell you how many people have contacted me in the last 3 weeks, especially. And it always happens at this time of year.
Sure.
There's always people talking about budget, but I've never had it more so about like, what do you mean 7 or 8% property taxes? And I take like 30 seconds to explain from the education part what is under my control and what is not. And everyone gets it. Now they're still upset at the end of the day because of the total impact, but they
Right.
actually get it. And I think most people are missing that part. I have no problem in indicating that when Strong Mayor powers were originally given, I asked about wondering whether the Strong Mayor powers would be can it be used with outside boards?
Mm,
And the answer is no.
mm,
Strong Mayor powers is not a CAM thing. This is an across Ontario thing. You cannot direct. You cannot use Strong Mayor powers to direct outside boards. You can respectfully request to do that. Council could, it's in some cases say, we don't want to give you an X amount of dollars or reduce if you can. But in most cases, the invoice is being slid across the table.
yeah, for sure. No, I don't disagree. I just wanted to ask about the framing. The other piece of this too, though, is, and this was at to go back to the budget breakfast, you had a chart sort of demonstrating this. When we're talking about the shared services, what we're really talking about is the library because we have a new building that's requires more staffing, the police because we're
Yeah,
trying to staff up the police, and social
yeah,
services because we're seeing that explosion. The onus
yes.
here isn't really on public health and the Grand River Conservation Authority, right?
That's right. Like there's seven of them. In fact, I would even throw the Downtown Guelph Business Association in.
Hmm.
And there's a few things with that. One is the heavy legislation or legislative impacts from those are prescriptive. There literally is an invoice that comes across the table. You shall pay. Like some of these legislate the legislation in the acts, like it says you shall pay. It's not like you could, you would, or maybe sort of should you. It's
Yeah.
shall. And the other point is that they were very, very small increases. The three out of the seven that are the biggest are social services, police, and library. And if people are sort of number nerds, it is point. Oh, it's 1% on its own
Mm,
property tax impact for social services,
mm,
0.6% for police, 0.2% for library, over and above what the normal thought proposed 2026 was going to be. So it's
right.
not that they are 1%, they are actually more than that, but it's 1% more than what we actually thought, as from a social services perspective, as an example.
Right.
So, again, if you did the math, 1.8% property tax impact is coming from just those three outside boards out of what is being proposed.
Right. And of course, they have, or you have worked with them to sort of delay the passage of those seven budgets till February, to hopefully get
Yes,
some extra time to find some, hopefully some efficiencies. Um,
yes, and that started.
yeah.
It started just a few days earlier than when I sort of announced it,
Mm,
because at the social services, the Joint Social Services Committee, which
hmm.
is 4 members of the county, 4 members of city council that sit on that committee together, that budget was actually four in favor and four against, and
Hmm.
actually that budget failed. And during that conversation at the committee where it failed, it was stated by the CAO of the county that they usually try to get their budgets done by January and they need time to kind of work on things. So when I heard that, I thought to myself, well, if the social services committee or sorry, county staff are going to be working on something up until January, then I might as well make all of the rest of them kind of fall in line with the same so that everybody could have time to look to sharpen their pencils a little bit. So I kind of wanted to make it equitable across all of this, the outside boards. And
Hmm.
it started just a few days earlier with that real kind of budget conundrum at the Joint Social Services Committee. So I've already met with the not police, sorry, the library CEO and chair. They were great. No one has an idea instantly, but they're yeah, we're going to go back. We're going to sharpen the pencil. I talked to the chair of the police board. I'm like, hey, we have a couple months here. We need to see if we can do something. Yeah, let's have a meeting about it. So everyone far has been like really good about actually appreciative of like, okay, good. We have a little bit of some time under us to see if we can do something. And my goodness, the public would very much appreciate that, looking at the high number of what the property tax impact might be.
Fair enough. You've said this a couple of different times. You gave direction to staff to come with different options. So 2.5, 3.5, and the increase
That is well, yeah, yeah.
that was passed in 2023. You said the 2.5 would have very negative impacts to the community. And that made me curious. Can you talk a bit about what the negative impacts might be if we had gone to 2.5?
Yeah, no, sorry, I'm just going off the cuff, but yes, I
Yeah.
can remember one. One of them was, hey Cam, we can save $750,000 if you just, we just stopped the crossing guard program across the city, and
Wow.
over 50 people there, and the crossing guards for community safety wouldn't be there anymore.
Wow.
Well, that was about a nanosecond no from me, right? I mean, that's just one, right?
Right.
So there was some on the operating. I'm sorry, I can't remember some. I'm sorry, I can't remember some of them on the that's a big one as an example. But then on the sort of financial health of the city, that's where a lot of it was pretty fearful too. To achieve like that extra 1% lower than sort of 3.5, it would require like deferring more, using reserves that we don't have,
Right.
maybe putting our credit rating at risk. It was very clearly stated to me to not do that. And our professional staff had real validity and real, truth bombs behind why they said no. They had never like pushed on it, but they just presented it appropriately for me, and I was just very instantly okay. This isn't right, and we are in a time where we have, three, library, city, police all had brand new wages and benefit union contracts.
Right.
They're all home to roost right now. We had South End Rec Center that is supposed to open next year. We have a new library that is supposed to open next year. We have to try to meet our targets for ambulance, our time targets and stuff like
Right.
that. Like, so am I not going to put 8 new paramedics in the budget? Of
Right.
course not. Of course I am. Am I not going to have, I hear people like, you should have a hiring freeze. Oh,
Mhm.
that's cool. So you're going to come to the South End Rec Center and watch me cut the ribbon, but I can't turn the lights on. I can't hire the lifeguard.
Sure.
Like these types of things, they aren't practical. But are those options to get us to 2.5? Yeah, I guess they were. That's what I mean by sort of putting things at risk, projects not being able to operate, and I just did not feel that that was appropriate.
No, but what you're saying it too is that it's not just a matter of like sort of cutting without like people actively noticing things like crossing guards. If there were no more crossing guards on the roads, people would definitely notice. But it's also like
Yeah,
just the general fiscal health. Like if we were like we could drain our
yeah,
reserve accounts, but that's not prudent fiscal planning at all.
it is not, and I'm not going to do that. That's that's just not me, especially when it is said to me not just verbally, but like in writing.
Right.
Like the response from it's public. The response from staff to me, several pages. It's available on guelph.ca/budget. There's the staff response that is like, these are some of the risks that you need to be aware of. It's all transparent, and that's the same of what they said to me. And if someone wants to try to put themselves in my shoes and read a response from professional people, if they want to, deviate from that, and then so be it. I'm not going to. I've done my best. It's
Mm,
not 4.59. At least it's coming in at 2.85. I've done my best. I did my best last year. It was supposed to be over 7.4%. Came in at 3.6%. That's half of what it was supposed to be. I am trying my best, but I'm not going to be a mayor that tries to put the fiscal health and services at risk.
sure, but I mean, part of this too is, and I think this is a question I asked last year. It's like, does it not get trickier from here that like the more we defer, the more we delay,
Yes.
what is I mean, granted, you have to win an election between now and then, but like, what does the 2027, confirmation look like for right now?
Yeah. I apologize if my dog is whining at the door. Someone
That's
might
all
be
right.
coming. I'm so sorry, everybody. But I'm sorry, you asked me. Oh, it's sort of about
The
kind of kicking
2027
things
budget.
down.
Yeah.
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 Look, I think some of it is some calculated risk, some sort of risk mitigation at the same time, but just the comfort level of some of the risk. We have a federal government now that has really promised that they were going to be investing in a lot of things for infrastructure for the community. We do have some signals from the province that they might look in the budget to make things maybe a bit more permanent when it comes to capital funding, as an example,
Mm.
instead of application based. And we're always putting our hand up, trying to get attention all the time. So, I think there might be some movement on the upper levels of government for more purpose-filled funding that is in perpetuity and not things that we have to jump around on. And also, I think that in some cases we did have to slow down. And actually, this was driven by staff, so praise to staff on this one. But we had to slow down some of the capital infrastructure because some of it is paid for by development charges, and no one's building right now.
Right.
So we're not getting those development charges in. So they had to actually defer some things because we're not getting that money in. So hopefully, things will smooth out and become much more better on the sort of building side of things. That if that DC revenue goes up in the next few years, that will translate into more things being done and not really kicking the can down the road so much. It's always a balance of affordability and trying to make sure you're not sinking at the same time.
This one, and it may be our last question, but this one is definitely for the number nerds, which is we've had a multi-year budget the last few years. We've been operating on a multi-year budget, which has required some very fine-tuning as crises have in affordability have sort of fallen on us. Do you take the experience of this term and the multi-year budgeting? Um, has the multi-year budgeting sort of made these tough decisions easier than if you were to say doing like trying to make a decision about the budget year over year, or as is like we're essentially like budgeting year to year anyway? What's your feeling having lived through both sides of this?
Okay, from a logistical point of view,
Hmm.
I would probably admit that just leaving the 4-year budget alone, probably from a staffing side, a planning side, might have been much easier.
Hmm.
But when reality hits people from an affordability issue and or legislative changes come in the middle of a planned 4-year rollout, you can't ignore those things too. So I would say it's become a little bit of a mix. There's
Mm.
that flexibility in year to do something. Whereas you do still have sort of this long-term planning that's been done on a multi-year budget. I think staff would say that they would rather leave the multi-year budget alone. But I think there's acceptance from staff that, again, if legislative changes all of a sudden occur and it impacts something, or a downturn in building doesn't bring in DC revenue,
Mm.
or overall affordability is an issue, there should be flexibility built in there to try to maneuver a little bit. And I think that's a fair, balanced approach. But if everything was just hunky dory, there no affordability issues and no legislative changes, then we would have just been on a 4-year journey, and it would have been what it would have been.
Okay. Uh, about a minute left before I definitely have to sign off. But you said you want to, and people will know the outcome of this by the time we're going to air. But do you
Yeah,
have a number in mind that is veto or no veto? Do you have a number?
I don't.
Okay.
So I look, if you were asking me that question 10 years ago, I probably would have said, absolutely, it is, fill in the blank. I really look. I really have I've changed a little bit over time to
Hmm.
understand the balance of value versus affordability. You know, what value are we bringing to the budget for the taxpayers? Does it make sense? Does it not? And there's, I would say that it is not. It more, I more tip a little bit more to value. The problem is that everyone has different values.
Yeah,
So and that's where the discussion of council will take place. So it's not a number driven thing for me. I think I'm just more scared about the what the taxpayers are going to be paying with those outside boards if they don't change.
right.
So, and that's a real, sorry to, I'll be as quick as possible, but that is part of the internal sort of, the internal fight that I have. Are we going to shortchange the city side um, because of what might happen on the outside board side?
Hmm.
Are we the ones to cut services? Are we the ones to defer and change things because of what they might do? I think that's an internal struggle that I'm having a little bit. I've got my lens on operating and capital for the city of Guelph, and they've got their lens on their things. Do I put operating and capital at risk for good valued things because the affordability of them in the collective might be higher? And I think I'm still struggling with that even just 2 days before the vote.
Well, as they say, to be continued. But for now, Mayor Guthrie, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Take care.